Welcome. We're so glad you're able to join us today for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chats. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our session today, just want to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live in our website at csuob.edu/alumni. For today's discussion, we ask that you please submit any questions using the Q&A box below so that our moderator is able to keep track of them and get all your questions answered. And now I would like to introduce Lucia Cost, a CSUOB Alumni Council member. She graduated in 1975 with a degree in Spanish and received her Distinguished Alumni Award in the year 2005. Lucia, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really excited about introducing today's speaker, Darrin Nguyen. He's a proud CSULB alum. He earned his BS in Mechanical Engineering in 2018. Darrin will address the challenges that qualified applicants face when trying to secure internships and full-time employment in a very competitive market. He'll also discuss the power of personal branding and offer advice on how best to tell your story so your application stands out. With employers changing the way they recruit candidates today, job seekers must brand themselves to adapt in this new climate. Darrin himself has a unique brand and perspective, and he'll share more on how to maintain the balance between having a traditional career and starting his own career development business. Leading our industry chat today, I'm pleased to welcome Darrin Nguyen.
Hi, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So like Lucia said, I'm going to be talking a lot about personal branding and, well, if you guys are interested, my personal background as well with my experience as an engineer as well as a business owner. So happy to be here.
Okay, so take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think you touched on a really big topic, Lucia, which is personal branding, right? And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because with COVID happening, especially now, and with a lot of students, a lot of job seekers, either having their jobs lost or and a lot of opportunities not available like they were in the past prior to COVID. I think personal branding is such a big important role in acquiring your next job, because it's like supply and demand, right? There's a lot of job seekers now available that are ready to work, and there's less jobs that are out there. And the reason why personal branding is so powerful is because you want to be able to be the best known or like the most known candidate for whatever role that you're applying for. And a quote that I really love from Jeff Bezos that talks about personal branding is, what do people say about you when you're not in the room, right? So if it were your friends or your colleagues, right, what do they say about your work ethic? What do they say about your attitude, your personality, right? Do you work well in a team, or do you work well independently? And these are the kind of things that you want to think about when you are kind of out there, right, on either social media or on LinkedIn or at your job, right? These are sort of impacts that you're kind of making on everyone else's perspectives. So I want to talk about how you stand out, right? And the biggest thing I want to mention and I want to talk about is LinkedIn. And the reason why I say that is because LinkedIn is the most popular, the biggest platform for professional networking. It has over, I believe, 630 million job seekers or just users on the network itself. And it's really amazing because it's basically social media, but for your jobs or for your careers. So aside from the traditional applications that you can apply to for companies via their websites or via, I don't know, Indeed or Glassdoor, one of the older websites, LinkedIn has a very special platform where you can engage with people, you can connect with them, you can look at people's experience and build a conversation out of that, right? They have their own learning platform called LinkedIn Learning. So it's such a very powerful platform in itself. And I want to talk about three things, really. One being your LinkedIn profile. The others is your sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. Oh, how you engage on your network or how you connect with individuals. And thirdly, how to find out what you want to do, because I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the first thing I want to talk about is like finding your passion, right? Personal branding comes when you know what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, whether it be a 1 month goal, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, right? And aside from or prior to even going to college, you're expected to know what kind of major you want to study or what kind of job you want to have, which I think is very, very hard when you're, 17 or 18. And I think that's the biggest challenge that a lot of students have. And even when students graduate, sometimes they don't even know if the major that they studied is going to be something that they want to, pursue later on in their careers.
Hey,
So,
Darrin?
yeah.
So if I could interject here before you really jump in, could you kind of give us all an example of how you went from being a mechanical engineer student,
Mhm.
and I know you had a couple of first jobs in that area, but then it morphed in whether it was in your head first, but number one, what were the things that you knew going in that you learned when you were at college, at university?
Mhm.
What tools did you have, at your beck and call then? And then what made you take that hyper, jump into this kind of new world?
Yeah, so a little bit about my backstory. I actually come from a first generation Asian American family. My parents moved or immigrated here, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. So, like many Vietnamese Americans that you might find in Orange County, my options were limited to either being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, professions that had very stable salaries or very stable pay. And at the time, I thought that, okay, that's a smart move. That's something I wanted to do. I didn't see myself being a doctor. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And my dad, being a technician, said maybe you should pursue engineering. So I chose mechanical engineering as my major. And during those 4.5 years I was at college, I did enjoy my time studying. And with the classes that I took and the projects that I had, it was actually really eye-opening for me to see what I could make out of my career. But also throughout college, I actually joined a business organization called Alpha Kappa Psi. So what the organization is about is all about professional development. And that's really where I found a love for professional development, whether it be resume, cover letter writing, interviewing, how to build a LinkedIn profile, and just how to engage and network with professionals. So that was really where I started seeing a possibility of starting a business within career development, because as a freshman joining that organization, I loved getting feedback and getting advice on how I could better myself and make myself stand out, as well as when I reached my junior and senior year, giving back and being able to take the advice that I learned and actually apply it and teach it to others who were either sophomores or freshmen or just new to the organization. And I told myself, like, okay, I can still find a job, doing engineering. That's definitely something I don't want to kind of throw away at the very beginning of my career. So what I did is that I went out and I spent about 3 to 4 months looking for a job, actually, where I work now as a process engineer. And I do work on my business after hours. So anytime, pretty much from 5 p.m. until whenever I sleep, I work on my business. And that's kind of where the balance kind of comes into play. And it's been about a year and a half since I started my business. So it's been really challenging. There are days where I would work very little on my business, or there would be days where I have a lot of meetings or I have a lot of events and I got to stay up late. So not only is it challenging, but it's also very rewarding seeing how many people we've been able to help.
Great. Now you can jump in.
Awesome. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is finding your passion or figuring out what you want to do. I think that's the very first thing you need to be able to figure out for yourself before applying to roles or applying to jobs, because I think every role or every job that you have is connected to where you're going to be, 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So I really think that people or, job seekers, especially whether it be students or just recent graduates, should really think about, their skills and what their interests are, because I do believe that there are career opportunities that align with both. And depending on what skills that you have and what you like to do, or maybe it could be sports, or maybe it could be going into tech, or it could be in healthcare, right? You like helping people. I think those are all three valid, or those are both valid. How would I say it? There are both two categories that you should definitely consider when figuring out what you want to do with your job. And then once you figure that out, and I make it sound a lot easier, like it's a 1, 2, 3 sort of step, but really, sit down, do some research, talk to people who are in the industries or who are, in the professions that you are interested in, and, talk to them. But that's something I want to get into later on. But it's like doing your due diligence and figuring out what you want to do is the very first step to personally branding yourself. And then once you're able to get an idea of what you want to do, then you want to hop on LinkedIn. And I'll say it right now and I'll say it again later. If you don't have a LinkedIn, I highly, highly recommend that you make yourself a profile, because it is one of the most powerful tools that you can have to find a career for yourself. And the 4 things I want to highlight from a LinkedIn profile is 1, being your headline, 2, your summary, 3, a featured section, and 4, being your recommendations. So the first one being your headline. A lot of people or a lot of users on LinkedIn use the default setting, which is just your current job or your current, maybe if you're a student, it will just say, for example, if I was a student at Long Beach, it would say student at California State University of Long Beach, right? And to me and to a lot of other people, especially recruiters, that's very generic, and that's not really something that stands out compared to others. I like to use mission statement to begin my headline. So for me, it's transforming careers by helping people tell their best story. It's an actionable phrase that shows people that when people read it, they know exactly what I'm striving to do, right? I have mentees of my own, and I help them create their own headlines as well, some being examples of guiding students into the next step of their careers, striving to become the best human resource, or spreading lessons and positivity through film. So these are all really high level actionable phrases that students can use, or anyone can use really, to show people like what they want to do.
So Darrin, just looking at this from overall standpoint,
Yeah.
when you're looking at that statement, how important is it for you for the industry you want to go into, okay? How important is researching like the top 4 or 5 companies that you'd like to, work for in that to create that statement?
I think it's important because every company and how recruiters use LinkedIn is that they filter candidates, or when they try to find candidates, they'll filter candidates by using keywords. So if you're able to figure out or do your research on the keywords that each company is using for the ones you want to work for, you can use that to your advantage and apply that to what your statement is going to include, right? For example, let's say the second example I gave was striving to become the best human resource. Human resource is most likely going to be a keyword when it comes to HR roles, whether it be a coordinator, a recruiter, talent acquisition, right? So I think doing your research is definitely going to be going to play a big role in getting your name in the results of the recruiter searches.
Okay, and so that works also for their strategy. And so you can find a way that you can help them with what you know in their strategy. Have you used that before?
Yeah, so I took a course on LinkedIn, and I think it was from JT O'Donnell. She's in the career development space as well, and she broke down how recruiters use LinkedIn from the back end to search for candidates. Because one of the biggest things, or one of the first things that people notice, is going to be, one, your name, and two, your headline. If you do any sort of search for people on LinkedIn, those are going to be the very first two things that people are going to see. And basically, it's real estate, and you want to be able to make the most out of the space that you have, so people will click on your profile and actually check out what you have to offer.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that in itself is one of the biggest hooks you can kind of use to reel people in to get invested in reading your story and what you're all about from your profile. And then again, like you mentioned earlier, Lucia, it's about including keywords, right? And you can, after your mission statement, you can use, you can just place several keywords, right? For me, it might be career development or process improvement, because that's the space that I'm in. For other people, it could be, let's say, in marketing, it could be digital marketing or social media management, something like that. Where when you look at the job posting, or you look at the company and what roles that they're offering, you can see exactly what they're looking for from the summary or from the description that they have for the job. So I think having a strong mission statement, including incorporating keywords, is going to be huge for your profile.
So I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to keep going and have to come back to it later.
Yeah.
What is your business? So
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you have two things. You have your day job, and then are you a consultant? Are you assisting people in finding jobs?
Yeah.
Are you more on the teaching side, or all of the above?
I would say I'm more of a career coach in that sense. So our business is called Engineered Careers, and it's not exclusive to engineers. It's meant to say, we want you to engineer a career for yourself, or create a career for yourself. I took that because I was an engineering major, so I thought it was a little bit witty. But actually, we help with career development for students or for job seekers. So we started off doing resume, cover letter writing, LinkedIn profile management, things like that. But then with COVID happening, with us being more active on LinkedIn, it evolved into us hosting webinars similar to this, where we talk about topics and we host workshops. We even have our own mentorship program. I have 4 mentees that I help out with for their job search. So we have our hands in bits and pieces everywhere, but overall, our goal is to help people tell their best story, right? And that can mean two things. One issue is that a lot of individuals and a lot of job seekers feel like they're perfect for the role, but they don't get it because they messed up in the application process along the way. So we want to help people showcase themselves and tell recruiters, or show recruiters who they actually are. And then another thing is that we want people to tell their best story, as in, find out what you love to do and pursue it. Because when we think about it, when you work for 30 to 40 years, work takes up a big majority of your time. And when you look back after retiring, we don't want people to think like, man, I wasted a bunch of my time doing something I didn't love. We want people to think like, hey, I love my job. I love the people that I met. I love the communities. And we really want them to have a positive feeling after they're done with work. So
Darrin, you do a lot with LinkedIn.
mm-hmm.
Someone's asking, are there any other social media sites that you use and that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think LinkedIn would be the most powerful tool or platform when it comes to job searching. And I would say, depending on your profession and what industry you're trying to get into, you can definitely leverage other platforms as well, whether it be, and especially if you're running your own business, right? It's more exposure for you that way. So whether it be on Instagram or on Facebook, and I know a lot of businesses now are even on TikTok, it's just ways for you to grow your brand. And let's say you want to be in social media, or you want to be in marketing. I definitely see you creating your own page for your own work that you've done, or to create a portfolio, right? If you're a graphic artist, something like that, or where you do graphic design, right? Again, making that page and dedicating, all the work that you've done to it, would be beneficial as well. But again, I think LinkedIn is probably one of the most powerful tools just because everyone's on there with the intention of career development or finding a job.
So in terms of the personal branding,
Mhm.
how important is it to really take an inventory of what your skill sets are and what your strengths are, and how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I break it into two things, right? And it's very simple. It's the skills that you have and the skills that you need, right? Um, when we take a look, and I'll take an example. When I was looking at job applications or job postings, right, I would pretty much skim like, does it have the title that I want, right? Mechanical engineer. Is it located around me? And if it did, and I fit the experience level requirement, then I would just go ahead and apply. But now I've learned that it's a lot more than that. It's seeing what's actually asked of you from the job responsibilities and the requirements in itself. And that's where the skills come into play. And you'll see exactly what they list out as far as the skills that they need from the candidate that they're looking for. And when you cross-reference that with the skills that you have and see what you're missing, you can go out and look online or, study up what skills that you need to learn. If it's something that you're able to take a course for, let's say on LinkedIn Learning, then awesome. I would recommend taking that course to give yourself knowledge in that area. But if not, I'd say a simple Google search is good enough so at least you're knowledgeable in that area, and that when they ask you a question regarding that skill or regarding the expertise, then you wouldn't be lost for words. So I think that's what makes the difference between people who do their research and people who don't, because um, it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to be a candidate that hits every single skill that the company is looking for. So you want to be able to not only showcase what you already know and convince them that you're the subject matter expert in that area, but also do research on the things that you don't know. So at least you have some sort of talking points when it comes to the interview or it comes to those conversations.
So if you haven't gone out to learn some of those technical skills that you're missing,
Mm-hmm.
how can you translate it into kind of letting in your statement, letting them know that you're working on it or involved in working on those skill sets, or is it better not to mention it? For example, what would be a turnoff for an employer if you don't have that down pat?
Yeah, for a lot of job seekers, I think, or for a lot of employers, I think that probably the biggest turnoff is when they ask a question about, like, let's say, um, do you know all the tools from Microsoft Office, right? Like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, et cetera, et cetera. If you just flat out say no, and you don't, and you don't have any reason, or you don't say like, no, but I have, done a little bit of my research, I think that would be the biggest thing that kind of turns the employer away, because it shows that they didn't really put any effort into researching about the role or researching about the job itself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that employers look for, is not only the technical aptitude of the candidate, but also the passion that they have. And passion translates into putting in research or putting in the time to learn about the skills or responsibilities that they're going to have to take on if they get the role.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then kind of moving along. So when we create our headline and, we do the research, we incorporate the keywords, we have a really strong mission statement. The next thing that we want to work on is our summary. And a lot of people tend to put very generic statements or phrases where they're either currently looking for a job, or they talk a little bit about what their current experience is. I personally, in the past, I've copied and pasted like job descriptions that I've from places that I've worked at and just kind of put it in. But that's not really ideal, because although it's a professional platform, it does give you leeway. It does give you some space to have personality to it. And that's what's so great about LinkedIn, is that it's not just so black and white. It's very colorful, and it gives you the option to, put your personality on it. So you have 2,000 characters to write a really good summary. So I'd really recommend writing it all. And again, I could break it up into three things. One being your passion, which you should have found out. Two being your backstory, your background, right? Why did I get into engineering, or why did someone get into marketing? Why did someone get into human resources, right? Maybe it's because they enjoy, working with people or placing people in the best jobs that they can place them in, right? So talking about sort of your drive and why that's important to you, because again, it just really kind of dials in on your passion and what you want to do as far as your career. And then third would be a list of your most relatable or or your best achievements that you've accomplished. And this could derive from a number of things, whether it be from work, from projects that you've had during schools, courses that you've taken, which were really extensive, certificates that you've gotten, right? Whatever is applicable to the kind of jobs that you want, I would highly recommend to put them in as well.
Would you include volunteering activities?
Oh, of course. I would not. I think, whether it's a traditional job or volunteering experience, like whatever it is, as long as you're able to find value and have it relate to the job at hand, then I would definitely say put volunteer experience on. Like that, to me, that has no less value than, an office job or a more traditional job. Yeah.
So is there a balance then when you're doing these, this 2,000 word kind of an explanation, or it could be a mission statement and you're calling it personal branding, to not limit it to the particular role that you're looking in it? Or is there a balance? Like if you're putting in for a specific position, you do need to cover that, but how do you kind of expand that? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So to expand on that, to not pigeonhole yourself, right? I would say you should write about and I'll use an example. So if someone wants to get into recruiting or they want to be an HR coordinator, right? There are very different roles that go into human resources. It could be coordinating the interview. It could be talent acquisition. It could be, management, sort of like the back end of it. So if you want to talk about sort of the industry as a whole, right? Human resources, rather than the specific role that you want to go into, then I would say you can write about that. For me, it would be career development, even though I do mentoring, I do resume writing. I don't particularly write about resume writing specifically, but I talk about how I want to help people develop their careers in that sense. And I think that's the approach that people should take, to not limit themselves to one role or the other.
Okay, and because I used to hire people where I worked, I think it's important. Is it important for you to really work with whoever you're working with, to make sure they understand that this is just to get you in the door? Because there's a whole nother piece that comes when you do get an interview. You're gonna have to do a lot more in-depth research, right?
Yeah. So again, I think that would be something that you could strike up in the conversation if an interview does happen, right? I think the whole point, again, is to gauge interest in whoever is reading your profile. And when they do strike up the conversation, whether it be via LinkedIn messaging or they ask you to go on a phone screening or a phone call, that's really where you want to clarify, what your intentions are, right? Again, it's all about the intended message that you want to send versus the perception or how they perceive it. So I wouldn't, or I would just, do my due diligence and, tell them if they do ask, like, hey, what kind of roles are you looking for? And, because I read, X, Y, and Z from your summary, are you looking for this particular role? Right. And then it would just be best to be clear and tell them exactly what kind of roles that you're looking for.
How much time do you think that the people looking when they're looking at these applicant statements, how much time do you think they spend on those?
As far as resumes, or just kind of like
resumes, or even that, the branding, that personal branding you're talking about?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to the more traditional setting of just, recruiters looking through resumes, I've read anywhere between like 6 to 7 seconds. And that definitely isn't a lot of time to completely understand, someone's experience. So personal branding is such a big difference, because when you engage with people on LinkedIn and you develop that relationship, you're more than just a piece of paper. You're a person, and when you work hard to make your profile stand out, the more they read, the more time that they spend on it, and the more context they think they can get out of your profile. For example, I always reach out to people to collaborate with engineer careers. And what I do is that I go through their profile, I go through their summary, and I read about, what they're passionate about, what they like to do. And I use that as a conversation starter, because when you do that, it shows the person that you actually spent the time to look into what they're all about and what they have to offer. And the same thing goes for recruiters when they're looking at candidates, right? When you write out a really great headline, you write out a really great summary, then it's more likely that they'll get more invested and spend more time actually reading through your profile, right? Perhaps you don't have as many internships as the next person, but you have that quality that people look for in a team setting, and you have that quality that allows you to work well with others, and that may make the difference between you and the other person that they're considering. So I think that's why personal branding is such a big player when it comes to job applications.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then the next section I wanted to talk about is the featured section. So actually, I'll reverse it. Again, the other section would be recommendations. So I think this is a really great application of LinkedIn, where you can actually ask people, sort of like letters of recs from your professors, from people that you've worked with, or your classmates, to talk about a specific skill that you want them to talk about or to elaborate on. So what's great about it is that you can ask someone, or even text your friend or a colleague and say like, hey, can you write a recommendation for me highlighting Microsoft Excel, or highlighting social media, and they can write a little blurb talking about how you're the subject matter expert, or how your impact within that specific role or function in the company made huge results for the company, and that they would recommend you for any other role. So it's great because it's not only you that's vouching for your own skills, but it's someone else, an external party. And again, it's just further validation to your skills and what you're good at, and that plays into personal branding. And then the next thing would be engaging in your network. So this is probably one of the biggest things that a lot of people in the career development space talk about, is engaging on LinkedIn. I view LinkedIn as a tool. So let's say you do set up your profile, it looks really great, and then you just shut it off for a week. That's not really going to help you out, because LinkedIn requires time and effort to be put into it in order to get results, right? And the biggest thing that people do now to brand themselves is engaging on content within LinkedIn. It's great because, just like Facebook feeds, people can post, their thoughts, their experiences, things that they learned, which are all really very valid in the LinkedIn space, to talk about pretty much anything, right? And what's great is that you can connect with someone just by commenting on it and building the relationship from it. And with LinkedIn, no profiles is private, everything's public. You can go on anyone's profile and see who they are from the post that they made. So it's great to actually read about what they have to offer. And if they write about a post, or they post something that that you really like, then comment on it, saying like, hey, I loved your post, and take input your own take on it. I think a lot of people comment on posts saying like, oh, this is great, or what a good read, or congrats, or something very generic, which doesn't stand out. Again, it's about standing out, and it does, and having, or writing those messages doesn't really stand out to the poster or the author of the post. So I always recommend to actually put in your own value. If they talk about a lesson that they learned from a LinkedIn learning course, right? And you took the course as well, or you're interested in the course, that's something that you can incorporate within your comment. And by doing so, they actually can see the comment, reply to if they want, and or they don't, right? Depending on how relevant your comment is. But I think that would be the first step to engaging on LinkedIn, because I know a lot of people are very scared to post, or they're very shy. So I think that's a good icebreaker to kind of get into the rhythm of engaging.
So another question was, what, in terms of these letters of recommendation or other referrals, or how old is old? I mean, if you've been out of school for 10 years, would you use something from 10 years ago? Do you have to say when it was? But it's still a recommendation.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think time is the biggest factor when it comes to recommendations on LinkedIn, just because I don't think it really highlights the timeline or the time frame as to when the rec was given. So it really focuses on the content itself. And what it does is that it will pretty much whatever they wrote will take up the most space on the recommendations, and then it will just be followed up by like who the author is, or who wrote it, and what their experience has been like, or what their experience is, right? So I would say if it's 10 years ago, if it's relatable to the job at hand, then it doesn't hurt you. Because
is it wrong? Yeah, is it wrong to kind of let the person know that you're asking for a recommendation if they could focus on 3 key areas that you asked them to? I mean, if they're appropriate, or how do you do that?
So what you can do, and what's great about LinkedIn too, is that if you don't have that sort of personal connection where you just, text them or message them individually, LinkedIn actually allows you to ask for a recommendation. And what you can do is craft your own personal message saying like, hey, Sean, or hey, John, or hey, Kathy, can you write, or would you be open to writing me a letter of recommendation? I enjoyed, working with you on this project, or on the project from this past company that we've worked at. And I would really love if you could write me a rec for highlighting my marketing skills, or my engineering skills, or my recruiting skills. And that's how you kind of break the ice, instead of saying like, hey, can you write me a recommendation? Thank you. So again, it all goes into how you brand yourself and how you relay the message in a way that's it's very opening and very friendly, so that they're more inclined to write you that recommendation in the first place.
Well, are there some really good, what are the greatest lessons you've learned in your job searching and writing since graduation, that you can use as good examples of good and bad?
Yeah, so I definitely think so. And to relate it to personal branding, so when I first got out of college, I had another job that I worked at for about 11 months, but that didn't work out. So I was back to the drawing board, and I was applying to jobs for 2 to 3 months. And what was crazy about that is that I applied to probably 5 to 6 jobs at least a day, just going through applications, going on company websites, going on LinkedIn just to find out jobs, going on Indeed. And I wasn't getting any hits. I got a lot of emails saying like, although your experience was great, we decided to move forward with other candidates, or something similar to that. So I actually went on LinkedIn, and I did more than just the bare minimum. Like, I reached out to recruiters who worked at the company that I work at now, and really set myself apart by writing that message to show them like, hey, my name is Darrin. I worked at, these companies in the past. I have my expertise in this, and this is how I, can bring value to your company. And that's really what it's all about. Like, if showing the recruiter like, hey, you're looking for someone with XYZ experience, I'm someone with XYZ experience, right? And by doing so, like, you push yourself past the first stages of the application process and get in that interview as well. Another example that I have is for one of my internships, I actually got rejected from it from the automated messaging. But then I reached out to an engineer who worked at the company, told him my story, you know, told him I was interested in the internship. And then a week later, I got a phone call for an interview. So that goes to show how much branding yourself and networking can do for you in your job search.
Right. So do you think when it comes down to the informal interviews, is that the best way to learn more about the company? Or do you think it's better to do the research about the company and know what they're about and have questions pertaining to that?
I would say the latter. Always do your research prior to connecting, because again, it shows them that you done your work and you did as much as you can to learn about the company and to educate yourself as to what the company has to offer and what you can do for the company itself, or what you can do within the position itself. Because you can write something or a message saying that like, hey, I know your company is looking for, you know, this particular role, or is hiring for this particular role, and I know your company's demographic or what your business model is like, or I know what kind of people that you guys are attracting, right? And if you're able to convey your message in a way where it shows them that you've done your research, it entices them to keep the conversation going and show them like, hey, you're just not another job seeker. You're actually someone who's very invested in the company itself.
Right. And then what are your thoughts? You know, you've talked about LinkedIn, but I think you kind of touched on the fact that it's a live entity. So you can't just leave it and not keep it updated, or because it may help you find your next job, or even before you know you want a next job, right?
Yeah.
What kind of answer that question in terms of maintaining that profile and keeping it up to date?
Yeah, I would say it goes back into engaging. When you get comfortable to the point where you start posting, or you start getting more responsibilities when it comes to your job, and you feel that it's relevant to include in your profile, then go ahead and include it. So you keep it updated. You add on to your list of responsibilities, you add on to things that you've accomplished, right? And that's the one thing that we want to focus on, is our accomplishments, not necessarily job responsibilities or job duties, right? We want to show people what we accomplished, not what we had to do. And I think that's the biggest difference. And it goes into what I like to use as the STAR question, or the STAR acronym, right? Situation, task, action, result. So I would think about this anytime before I add something onto my LinkedIn profile, or as far as my job experience, right? What the situation or task was that you were asked to handle. What actions did you take when it comes to that project, or it comes to that task? And what were the results that you accomplished, right? How did you help the company achieve its goals, right? For myself, my company is in manufacturing, and we're all about output and production, and how much product we can make in a day. So as a process engineer, my job is to make sure that we're outputting, or we're producing as much product as we can without having so many discrepancies or problems along the way. And if I come across a project that I've accomplished and I have the numbers for it, or I know I made a difference in as far as the company goes, or as far as my department goes, then that's something I would want to put on my resume, or want to put on my LinkedIn profile.
So you touched on networking. And so in terms of that, would you ever recommend kind of how to ask a professional in that field, or recruiters, or even someone from that dream company you're trying to get into, for advice on things like getting an internship or getting into their position? I don't know about their position, but eventually. So what's your advice there?
Yeah, for me, and this is something that I learned from another career development coach too, is that when you're on LinkedIn messaging other people, the worst that they can say is no, and you have nothing to lose from messaging other people. So I would say, yeah, go ahead, message, whether it be a recruiter or whether it be a professional. the advice I would give is to be intentional with your message, right? Start off with building the relationship first, asking about, their day or their job or what they love about their job, what they love about their company, and have it organically translate into you asking questions about the role or the job function at hand. And once they get more familiar with you and they warm up to you, then they'll be very, very happy to tell you pretty much, whatever it is that you need to know. And I think that plays a huge role again into figuring out what you want to do, because along the way you might find things that are a green light for you, and that there might be a moment where you think, okay, this is exactly where I want to be. This is the company I want to work for. This is the job that I want to have. Or it might, steer the other way. It might tell you that you don't really want to work for this company, or you don't want to work for this job because the person isn't really talking highly about their role, or they don't really seem enthusiastic about what they're doing. So again, it can provide you valuable information either way.
So when you talked about networking, and then I'll kind of let you get back into the
Yeah.
your progression before it's too late. But when in networking, are there I know you belong to different organizations before, and are there organizations now that you're involved in that help you with that networking, and it makes it more organic to ask for advice or ask for mentors?
Oh yeah. So with my organization that I'm in, which is Alpha Kappa Psi, we are the oldest and largest business fraternity or business organization. And we have, I think, over 200 chapters nationwide and internationally as well. So even though I'm an alumni and I already graduated, when I look at someone else's profile and I see that they're also from AK Psi, I feel like there's instantly less pressure to message them, because that's a common bond that we have with each other. That's something in common that we have with each other. So for me, that would be a very good icebreaker to start out the conversation. And that's an example of how being affiliated in an organization can help you even beyond your college years, because who knows, I've heard stories about where the recruiter and the candidate were in the same organization, or the same teammates were in the same organization. So being affiliated can provide with so much value when it comes to job searching and when it comes to relationship building.
So it's who you know sometimes.
Yeah, I
Right?
would say definitely now it is a lot of who you know.
I used to hear that back in the 70s. Darrin, why don't you continue on terms of your talking points? I think we've answered most of the questions so far.
Yeah, so I think we covered a lot of the last portion again. And I just want to reiterate how to connect on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of students and job seekers now are hopping over to LinkedIn when they didn't before. I was no exception to that either. When I was still job searching, I was always on LinkedIn, and when I wasn't job searching, I wasn't on LinkedIn. So you get into that sort of rhythm when it comes to the platform itself. And it's just a reminder that we're always networking, we're always branding ourselves, whether we're on or off the job, and that LinkedIn should be used as a tool, consistently, because your priorities might change, or you might, change your mind about what you want to do later on down the road. So it's good to always be branding yourself, or always improving your LinkedIn profile, or whatever it may be, engaging on other people's content to be relevant, or to just put your name out there. Because even if the person that doesn't have the opportunity that you're looking for, they may connect you with someone else that is working at a place that you worked out, or that you want to work at. So an example, like I held a webinar with someone from LinkedIn who launched the pilot program for the LinkedIn Learning and Student Ambassador program, but I didn't reach out to her directly. I actually was referred from a connection of mine. So that was something that was really special, because I had no prior connection to her. She's over in Canada, and I would never think that I would connect with someone, internationally. So just by keeping yourself in the loop and engaging and just growing your connections, you'll soon see that the possibilities or the opportunities that you have will go pretty much, or will multiply, and you'll see a lot of opportunities that you never even considered in the first place, maybe. So for me, when I was still in school and I wasn't really on LinkedIn or anything, I was really stuck on engineering, and that's what I wanted to do. But now my priorities change, and I want to get into career development. So while I do both concurrently, I work a lot on my business, and that's something that I wouldn't have been able to do if I wasn't on LinkedIn, and I didn't meet the people that I met while on the platform.
You noticed a lot more activity on your site on LinkedIn during COVID?
Oh yeah, everyone, especially now, is posting and engaging. I don't think I've ever been this active personally since COVID happened. A lot of people are now at home, and a lot of people are unfortunately unemployed or job searching, so they spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. And of course, the more time you spend on it, the more time you'll engage with the post, or the more it'll be more likely that you engage with people posting or connecting with other people. So I definitely see a big rise in just activity on LinkedIn.
Well, that COVID question was a good segue into another question.
Yeah.
So with COVID, interviews will now be happening in Zoom. Do you have any tips for a successful Zoom interview?
Oh, yes. I think we wrote a blog article about this for video interviews, but let's see if I can remember. One is always plan out where you want to interview. Have like a dedicated room, or have a spot in your house that will be quiet and has good lighting and has a good internet connection. I think the worst thing that can happen that isn't really your fault is having technical issues. So once you figure that out, like test it out on your computer a day before, or on your laptop, to see if there's good connection, if it isn't, if your connection isn't slow, isn't lagging, and if the person can see you, right? Because it is a face-to-face interview. And then secondly, I would say keep eye contact with the camera and not the person. I think when you start looking down, it draws attention away from their eyes, and basically you want to have that eye contact when you're when you're talking to someone, and it makes the conversation more authentic in that sense.
So that takes the place of the firm handshake.
Yep, exactly. Because obviously you can't physically meet, or you can't physically shake hands. So the best thing to do is make a good impression by eye contact, having good posture, things like that.
Right. Anything else?
And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today, is really just to spend time figuring out what you want to do. For some people, they know exactly what they want to do. For others, they need to try things out, or they need to think about it. So really dial in on what it is that you want to accomplish, or what you want to do as far as your career, and just go out there and try it out. If it works out, then awesome. You found a career that works for you. But if it doesn't, then it's fine. I think a lot of times we get very anxious, or we get into the mode of like, what if, or like, what if I tried doing this 5 years ago or something, and you don't want to live that life of regret. So I would say try it out. If you love it, then that's awesome. If you don't, then that's fine. You experienced it, and at least you can check that off your list as far as careers that you don't want to do.
I noticed on your LinkedIn, I really got into your LinkedIn. You've got a good one. Some of your influencers. So you want to talk a little bit about how important those are?
Yeah, I think having a mentor is a really important thing, and mentors can come in many shapes and forms, whether it be your colleagues, your managers, or who I like to listen to, which are my influencers. Biggest one being Gary Vee. He is a social media influencer, and one of the biggest things that he talks about is figuring out what you want to do and just doing it. Like, no excuses. Even if your parents say that you shouldn't do it, or if your friends say that that's a dumb idea as far as like your business or your career, like, it doesn't matter, right? It's really what you want to do. And I think that reflects highly as to the advice that I give to other students or other job seekers, because again, they get very antsy when it comes to all the different things, or all the different opportunities that they might want to achieve. But I would say really focus on what it is that you want to do now. And even if your parents, say like that's not something realistic, or your friends say like, that's not something you want to do, really kind of block that out and just do what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, again, you don't want to live that life of regret. And at least you know that that's something that you pursued in your life.
What are some of your favorite volunteer projects that both two things? One that tie in with the work you're doing, but also don't tie in with the work you're doing.
Yeah, I think taking up mentees is something that I do as far as my volunteer time. So I actually took in four mentees that I help out with, that I meet once a week, to talk about their career goals, and really navigating them through the job search, connecting them with individuals that are in my network, teaching them how to write a great resume, a great LinkedIn profile. So it's been really amazing to see them evolve, because it's been about, I would say, 6 to 7 weeks since I started with them, and now they have really great profiles. People are more, they've noticed that there are a lot more people who are willing to connect with them from their requests. So that's definitely something that I found really rewarding for for the time that I volunteer. And then outside of work, was that the other portion too?
Yeah.
Outside of work?
Yeah, because sometimes you do have some that are just favorite volunteer activities.
Oh man, that's hard to think of right now, just because my work kind of revolves around, or my time kind of revolves around work. I'm not sure. To be honest,
Oh, I
since
didn't mean to ask you a question. Because, when I do know that now that I'm retired, I have other activities that I volunteer at, whereas before it's probably more connected to my job. And
yeah, I mean, I would say my business is sort of like my off time, because it is really something that I love to do. Like I've helped 2 students from UC Santa Barbara get internships at Amazon and Snapchat. So that was really amazing for me. And, it was more so like just kind of helping a friend out at that point, because we built the connection, built the relationship. So it didn't even feel like work at that point. So I guess something like that would be considered my off time.
I think we're running out of time, but there was another question in terms of knowing the company that you're going to work at. Looking at things that would make you stand out in terms of what, who's on their board, what they're involved in, what are their favorite charities, that kind of thing. Have you ever had any of that kind of discussion in your sessions?
Oh yeah, of course. And anytime I tell my mentees to look up someone's profile, aside from their job experience, I tell them look at what their interests are, or where they volunteered, right? And that could be a talking point when you strike up the informal conversation. And I think that's a good segue to building up the relationship with them. And especially if you have a personal connection too. Let's say someone volunteers at the local hospital, or they volunteer, I think, with their local high school, right? And you do as well. That could definitely be something that you both talk about, where you talk about, the things that you enjoy, the things that you struggle with, right? So I think those are 2 things that a lot of people relate on, right? The things that they enjoy the most, and the things that they struggle with the most. And people like to vent. That's something that's natural, that comes to a lot of us, especially with our friends. And when you develop that relationship where it becomes more open and a little bit more personal than just sort of talking about office work, or your traditional work, then they warm up to you, and you just have a better quality of conversation overall.
We're running out of time, so is there anything that you want to wrap up and make sure you cover?
The only other thing is, if you guys, or anyone that's listening, wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to. It's just my first and last name, Darrin Nguyen. So if you guys want to learn more about, personal branding or advancing your career, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you guys. But other than that, I think that wraps up everything that I wanted to say.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Noemi to close this out.
Lucia, you had one more question in the Q&A box.
I thought
I'll just go ahead and ask, what are some of your greatest lessons you learned
Oh, no,
in your
we asked
job
that
since
already. We
you
asked
asked it already?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Unless he still has something to say about it.
No. Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Lucia, so much. It was a great conversation, definitely. Hopefully people will follow you on LinkedIn. Again, this session was recorded and it will live on our website at csub.edu/alumni. And a reminder, like Darren said, follow us on social media at CSUB alumni to learn about future programs like this and other programming coming from your alumni office. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.